Hello, lovely beings. I'm JJ Rose. Today I have with me a very special guest, Miss Saige.
Hi.
Well, Saige and I met being that we are in the same paranormal researching group, and I got to find out a whole bunch of fun stuff besides being a gorgeous person inside and out.
Thank you.
Inside counts the most. You also are an actress,
Yes.
and you blew up on TikTok. All because you decided to share with the world your spiritual awakening experiences.
Yes. I I started having a lot of downloads, especially like 2019, 2020 is when I got hit with a lot of um, information, and I I felt like I needed to share it with people, and I just decided to put it out there, and I just trusted that the universe was going to show the people who needed to see it exactly what they needed to see.
That sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar, huh?
And I mean, you were kind of one of those overnight sensations, as TikTok does.
Mm-hmm.
The algorithm just is magical and does what it does. But I think what was really nice is, especially in your age group, in the early 20s, it really helped a lot of other people during that time period who were also waking up, who didn't necessarily know the things that they were experiencing were normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of nice to have camaraderie with other people,
Oh,
right?
definitely. I mean, that was a really big motivation for me to just put it out there because, I was a little bit hesitant about like the information that I would be putting out there, that energies, etc., communicated with me. But the overall feeling that I just kept getting was that I wish I had someone to tell this to. I wish I had someone to express this to, share it with, and it just kind of hit me that if I feel this way and how overwhelming like certain parts of what stages of an awakening you're going through,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I was like, I need to help create a community where people can find each other, most importantly.
Absolutely.
And that was really my goal with this TikTok, is just to create a community where, it wasn't just about the videos. It was about people being able to like go in the comment section. Oh my gosh, you've experienced that? Me too. And then instantly those people have each other to communicate with.
Well, not only even to find friends, but also to find good resources.
Exactly.
I mean, your generation is hit with the ability to just quickly go online, and you guys are lambasted with all this information.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike when I was young, where we had to go searching, we had to find physical books or people
Yeah.
who knew, and you have to find people who know the people who know the people.
Mm-hmm. And especially with very niche stuff. I mean, this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, depending on what your downloads are, that can be quite overwhelming. And especially, considering the entire world shut down around that time, and a
Exactly.
ton of people decided to wake up, which is great. But at the same time, I could see where that would be very unnerving. But congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
Because it's huge. And, when I first met you, I had no clue any of that. You were part of the paranormal team, as was Alex and Tim. And, I deliberately don't like a lot of background information.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first time I met you girls, I needed to get my own read, my own feel
Mm-hmm.
to do the work that we were going to do. But instantly I just clicked with both of you. And I'm so blessed to have both of you in my life, as well as Tim. But on top of all of that, it was interesting because as I'm doing the initial clearing, you were not presented to me as an empath or anything. I had known that you had had some experiences in the past, which is why you wanted to be part of the team. But I didn't know as much. And then we had our little Zoom meeting at first, before you flew up here. And I was like, oh, sweetie, okay. This is going to be easy. This is a cakewalk. And energetically, we just took to each other so quickly, which is wonderful. And you blossomed. Because in the beginning, when I met you, and through at least the first 6 months of our communication, you would say the phrase, apologize in advance, but you would say the phrase a lot, this is going to sound crazy, but.
Yeah.
And I rode your hiney on this about stop saying you're going to think this is crazy. Because there's very little you could tell me that's going to sound crazy to me.
Exactly.
Especially with you, being that I know you are very grounded and you're very rooted and you tried to triple check everything. But I would like you to speak to that because it's something that when I started my YouTubes and started actually, venturing out of the broom closet into the world a little bit more, a lot of people who are having awakenings or a lot of people who are really starting to step into their gifts, this is something that I hear a lot is, am I crazy? Or this is going to sound crazy. How do I trust myself? How do I know this is real? And I know you've had a real growth session with that. And I, obviously someone like me where I've been born like this, I come from a way different background. I can empathize with it. I can understand. But there's a part of it that doesn't like I'm not able to speak on it the way that you are. So I would appreciate if you would speak on learning to trust yourself and what have you implemented in order to make sure those downloads are true or those gut feelings are coming true. And just discuss.
Well, thank you so much. Very beautifully well said. For me, it's definitely been a process because, when you get information, feeling, stuff like that, and it's coming at you at different times of the day, especially times of the day that you'll never expect it to come through. Should I just start? Sorry.
I think just talk about all of it.
So there's a lot of stuff that happens when you're getting downloads.
Feelings.
Feelings. I mean, it can be especially really overwhelming if you're not used to it all the time. But one of the ways that over time I've gotten to navigate it has been really, especially meditation. I've said this to so many people because I'm a firm believer in that, how I'm going to connect with spirit in the universe is going to be completely different than someone else, even if I'm so alike them in the way we approach things, especially like this. But at the end of the day, your relationship with spirit is going to be your relationship with spirit, and you have to figure out what works for you. And when you connect with spirit, and especially with these downloads and stuff, that's how I've been able to navigate it more, is through meditation and just feeling out the energy in my body, how it sits, and allowing it to just flow through. But I've came to you and I've just been, especially on some downloads that we've even had shared, that we've gotten very similar things.
But it's go into that.
But it's not even this. But we're not even interpreting it the same, which is the importance of you have to figure out your connection with spirit, because the information is there and accessible to everyone. But you also have to give yourself grace and space to be able to actually get into that zone and be able to connect, and then you're accessible to it.
Well, and I think what you hit on with the meditation, I mean, let's face it, most of us are extremely busy.
Yeah.
Right? Constant. I know, me, I'm always going 100 miles an hour all the time. I'm multitasking like no one's business. So sometimes it's quite inconvenient when a download wants to come in and I have to stare at a wall for 3 minutes and let it process. Or if I'm in the middle of something and something comes in, it's very quick to be I'll get to that in a minute, and then you forget about it.
Yes.
Whereas meditation is that quiet, personal time that you get to slow down. You're not going to sleep. You're just having a moment. Okay, bring up all that stuff that maybe I missed throughout the day, and let's bring it on forward, and hopefully the math will start mathing, and we can figure out what the spirit is trying to convey to me. Because I know I've had downloads that have taken multiple days.
Yeah.
Because I am so busy, I don't have the space to slow down enough for it to come through all at once.
Yeah.
But when it comes through in multiple days like that, usually when I look back at the end through those multiple days, things I've experienced in those multiple days will help it make sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think something that isn't talked about a lot is the physical toll this takes on us.
Oh my gosh. And the way that we both have it come to us, very different, but it does not, it's, I think when you're having these downloads, I think, especially if you're working with vibrations that are so intense. And then you also have to really kind of think about what's our human vibration and what we kind of resonate at. And then you're completely going to have this integration of what's going on currently in your physical body with information that is given to us. And it can be toll taking in the sense of some days I've gotten downloads and for a couple days I don't want to do anything but just sleep, and my sleep schedule gets mixed up. And it also doesn't help when sometimes the downloads come in at like 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh yeah, those are always fun.
Yeah. So
love being woken up by that.
Oh my gosh, it's but honestly, it's a really beautiful thing, but it does really take a toll on people's physical health, and especially if you're not fully aware of what's actually happening, it can be very confusing because I think that's how even sometimes, I've met a lot of really beautiful people who are super intuitive, just super amazing. And I notice that they struggle with anxiety and like depression. And I think, even with me, I've had like, some anxiety and stuff, but the more I like tap back in and let my body connect spiritually and that beautiful intertwining of both, it settles it out tremendously. And I think it's misinterpretation of sometimes what's happening on a spiritual sense with your physical body.
Right. And I'm not negating people who have depression or anxiety.
Not at all.
You've already had it. That it makes sense. And I'm always the first one to say rule everything physical out first.
Yeah.
Make sure you've eaten, make sure you're sleeping enough,
Yeah.
make sure you're hydrated, your vitamins are up to par, make sure it's not a medical issue, rule all that out. But if you've ruled all that out and you're someone like me who's had doctors tell me multiple times you are the sickest, healthiest person I've ever met,
Yeah.
then it's got to be something spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's when, I know I've been really focusing lately on some of my content of telling people, take your vitamins, take your minerals, iron, magnesium, your minerals, your B vitamins. Even if you aren't where Saige and I are at with downloads and energy and all the intuitions and don't compare yourselves to us. But even if you think, oh, I'm just starting in this, you are being bombarded on a daily basis with this. And whether or not you physically or mentally or spiritually understand what you're being bombarded with, it's taking a toll. And this, I think, is why a lot of people are suffering from physical ailments and a lot of anxiety, not knowing what am I sensing?
Mm-hmm.
And so they just think, oh, I have anxiety and I need to take a class or I need to take a pill or I need to do this, instead of calming down and saying, okay, maybe I am sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm going a little out of our box right now, but, we know someone in common, our skeptic on the team, Alex, who has said, no, never experienced any of this stuff before, and yet it's very clear that she has on some level, whether she fully comprehends it the way that we do or not. And I know she starts to understand that here and there, but it's interesting because I see someone like her who's very logical brained, very rational, doesn't have these experiences like you and I are having on a daily basis, but yet the toll is still there. And at the end of the day, like when we did our most recent paranormal group session where we did an outing, I mean, the outing in itself wasn't physically tolling
No.
at all. I mean, it was a small walk and you stopped every couple steps. But what was interesting is at the end of the day, all of us looked like we needed to take a nap.
Like we would have just walked 7 miles or something.
Yeah, in the sun, no water type of thing. It was interesting because here, you and I, okay, that makes sense. Even Tim to a part because he's pretty intuitive and feels things. But even she had it.
Yeah.
And these are the things that when I see them and I have these real life examples that I can pull out and, not putting on Alex on blast, I love you, darling. But it's nice to share because I feel like there are some people out there who think like, oh, well, because I'm not having visions or I'm not having this or I'm not having that, none of this stuff is affecting me. You're being bombarded on a daily basis.
Exactly.
I mean, even me energetically wise, and I limit the amount of news that I consume. Yeah. I limit the amount of what goes in my mind, what goes in my body. I'm very, very fastidious on all of those things. And you've seen some of the things, like, they don't even make sense with me. And even times when we've all been together, where all of a sudden all of us are like, wow, I just need 10 hours of sleep for absolutely no reason, and that makes no sense. But I'm sorry I'm belaboring that, but it is a part of this work specifically. And because the veil is down, in shreds if best, because so much is coming through, this is why spiritual protection, you and I have talked a lot about this because you're doing readings now and you're working with physical people. You're in a space where you're working with not only physical people in front of you, but also remotely as well. And spiritual protection is so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
And you and I both know you can have amazing gifts and you can do this without spiritual protection or something that you're doing in your mind before you're stepping into that space and giving those readings, and the best person will be sucked dry. And you've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crucial to protect yourself, and I think, like, especially over probably a span of like maybe 4 months, I've kind of brought up to you just a few times, like, with energetically how everything is right now. I've had to rebubble myself so many times throughout the day. And it's like it just sheds so quickly. And maybe it's doing readings, but, but it feels more of like what we're just going through as a collective energetically. And
absolutely.
And I think that's why it's like also so important because of, we're feeling this kind of stuff, like so many other people are feeling it, but they might not just be recognizing exactly what it is yet. And
they'll get there eventually. I mean, with the veil being this far down, everyone's going to get there soon. Everyone's on their way. We'll put it that way. Whether you want to be or not. You can deny it till the end, but there's going to be a point where there's no denying it anymore. You won't be able to call them just balloons and swamp gas anymore. They or shadows, or I don't even know some of the other things that people have explained things away from. But in going into a bit about the veil, because you and I have been in pretty good constant contact,
and especially with this topic.
Yeah. So when this first started happening, you and I talked, and I said nothing deliberately. I just kind of let you talk, and you kept bringing up how you were having like a swarm of seeing, feeling, dreams, all sorts of stuff that was happening, like way more than normal activity.
Yes.
And I like lightly broached it. I still hadn't put anything publicly out at this time. And I lightly broached it with you. And it was like a light bulb went off for you.
Absolutely.
And you understood what was going on.
Yes. Yeah, the volume of what I was getting, especially with everything that's been going on, it was just getting the interpretations of the dreams and stuff was just so much that it became really confusing in a deep sense. So, like, talking to you about it and, us being able to kind of feel it out. And then also, I don't know, it was just such an experience of, especially when we were on the phone and I just was channeling, no cards or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, yep. And
Yeah, so just to explain that, so Saige and I were on the phone, and I had a situation going on, and I didn't want to tell her too much, so I asked her to pull cards, which is kind of her specialty for now. And and she said, well, can you give me what do you want me to pull them on? And I said, just randomly pull. And I think I told you 3 cards, and a 4th one fell out. And I started laughing, and you were a little bit confused. And I said, I'll tell you when we're done why I'm laughing.
yeah.
And I made you do a blind read. I gave you no reactions whatsoever, which you were totally uncomfortable with, because you're normally used to like someone saying, uh-huh, or right direction, or that makes sense, or something. Yeah. And I said, no, just go. Mm-hmm. And so you give me this reading, and you're, doing the whole stepping all over yourself thing, like, am I right? Am I not right? And I said, just go. And then you just let loose. And it was everything that I was dealing with. So at the end of the reading, you said, okay, now can you tell me? And basically I was in this situation where the number 4 kept coming up over and over and over again. So when I asked you to pick 3 cards and the 4th one fell out,
oh my gosh,
I was like, well, there's confirmation right there. And then when you did your reading, I mean, you went beyond the cards, because as you named off the cards, I was looking them up on my phone. Mm-hmm. And you were completely channeling, and it was everything I was dealing with, which basically what had happened was I knew the veil was down. I knew I needed to speak on it more. I was a little trepidatious about what I needed to speak on, because I had had this major download that came through. And I felt like, even though the information was pertinent for a lot of people who would listen to me, if I went full bore with it, it could be a little confusing. Mm-hmm. And then I had another person reach out to me very randomly. I had never met this person, knew their spouse, and basically their spouse said they had this horrible dream, they need to talk to you. I end up talking with them, and they had the same download. It just came in a dream form. And I was sitting with this information saying, okay, well, this is Spirit's way of telling me, like, it has to go out, but how do I put this out in a way that people aren't going to think, like, I'm being an alarmist?
Yeah.
And then you start just funneling down this message, and you got to the point in it where you said, I'm actually getting scared with what I'm bringing through because of how intense it was. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I had someone recently ask me, they said, what is it like for people like you when you get these downloads of this information of things to come that aren't necessarily great or fun, of things that are going to happen, and how much energy and time do you spend on them? And it was one of those moments where I thought about it, and I said, this has happened a lot, and these things don't necessarily affect me when they happen, but because I'm alerted energetically, there's some link with it, whether I've been there before, whether I know people from there, whether it's from part of my bloodline in some circumstances, or whether just energetically on some other level I'm helping with whatever's happening. I don't always understand what my link to it is.
Yeah.
But if I'm being alerted to it and I'm not able to do anything about it, then my job is to pray on it, utilize my energy in the best way possible. And if it's a situation where I need to let someone know, obviously that happens. If it's a situation where I need to bring other people in and we need to do focused intention work for it. Mm-hmm. But, there are times just like you when I get heads up of bad things to come. And it's an uncomfortable position to be in sometimes because we're not able to intervene. It's not something we're able to stop. Why are we being alerted to it? And I know that you and I had a conversation recently where you were telling me you were feeling really anxious that something was going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. And I looked at you and looked into it and I said, it's not going to happen to you directly. You're picking up on the collective. Mm-hmm. And then we did our spirit box session, which was fascinating because I was asking roundabout questions. And when we played the footage back, and we actually heard what was actually being said instead of what we thought we were hearing, which made no sense at the time, was actually quite hilarious what we thought we were hearing. But when we played it back and slowed it down, and in some cases had to actually reverse the words, in the first session we did, it said, let them conclave. And it literally told Tim to leave at one point. And then it said, let them conclave. Well, what ended up happening, unbeknownst to us, because we had no clue it said this, we thought it said, you're a broke bitch.
It sounded like it.
It did. It
came in clear and put one of us in our place. But yeah,
it was hilarious, actually. So, so at the end, for absolutely, Tim basically takes off. Because, I mean, it said, like, bye, Tim, like 3 times, which is actually kind of funny. And all of a sudden, Alex just takes off with my mom, and you and I are left there. And we end up having this conversation that we really needed to have, but neither of us kind of wanted to have it. And you told me about this giant download full of anxiety, and I was confirming back with you. And then we did the second spirit box session. And I asked more pointed questions, because you and I kind of both knew it had to do with some things regarding tectonic plates. That's as much as I'll say, on the West Coast. And so in our second spirit box session, I asked the question directly, thinking it was happening more down towards us. And it ended up saying Oregon on up. And the next day, we get a news alert that the Cascadia Fault off the coast of Oregon is now on high alert for a major quake. And then all these earthquakes ended up happening up in that region. Not huge ones, not devastating ones, but big enough that'll definitely make, Californians go wild when there's anything over a 4.0. Anything under that we ignore, but anything over a 4.0, we kind of look up and like, are we on alert? Is the big one coming? So it was interesting, but would you be willing to talk a little bit about that download that we had the conversation about?
Yeah. So kind of condensing the whole download, since it's really a lot. Much like in my TikToks as well, I like to just do a dense form of it, but I would definitely say, if you're listening and you've ever thought that we are just, these energetic beings, whatever you want to call it, actually experiencing a very human experience, and it's a very temporary thing, I would definitely keep trusting that intuition.
I would just say that you had it confirmed that
yes,
we are indeed spirits having a human experience. That is a giant download, and I think you're still processing part of it. That in and of itself is almost an awakening of its own within it, so don't feel bad about needing to take your time with that. Yeah. And I'm also putting you on blast. So
it's just so wild because, you get these downloads, and then it's like every few months, it's like so many people will just get the next level of the awakening. It's like, you're following this journey, you just keep getting more and more. And it's, I like to say, like, when you tap in, it's like you're constantly leveling up over time. And, it's a very beautiful yet overwhelming experience. But, you have to figure out, again, emphasis, what works for you in it and what's going to help. Like, for me, I need to ground like crazy. because
in your
most of the
body.
time I'm out of my body and I'm receiving information.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it could be grounding, but it's not a one shoe size fits all to
It's
this.
not.
You have to figure out what works for you, which is why I will always say meditation is the key to anything around this, because the longer you put in time for yourself and reconnecting with spirit, the more you're going to develop the tools and the routine that works for you and how you navigate all of this.
That, and also just make really, really good choices with the content that you're listening to.
Exactly.
There is a lot of stuff out there in the world right now. There are a lot of people who are telling you what someone else said, i.e., authors and people of the past, and they're recapitulating what they said, but they change a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as we know, you can read the same thing between 12 people, and everyone's going to interpret it differently, just like everyone's relationship with God, spirit, universe is different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Something is going to hit a chord for everyone differently, depending on where you're at in your journey, depending on where you're at life, depending on what even knowledge base you have.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is why, there is a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
A lot. And there's a lot of wonderful things. If you're visual, there's great visual stuff out there. If you're auditory mainly, there's amazing stuff out there. If you want to read it, great stuff out there. And I'm going to make it a point. I am in Spiritual Book Club, but I'm going to make it a point on my socials to do more in which I'm showing people resources and things that have worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big reader. I'm more into listening. Visually watching stuff doesn't work for me, whereas your generation is much more visual.
Yes.
That's why TikToks and stuff like that work for you versus me. And I either get bored or I get ADHD immediately when you sit me down to watch a movie or a show. So it's awful. But put a book in front of me and I'll sit there for 12 hours.
Yeah.
So, go after whatever it is that really is guiding you in the right direction. But I definitely recommend, instead of just listening to somebody else paraphrase, what someone else wrote about in the past, get the book yourself, read it, do an audio book, Kindle, whatever it is that you need to do. But try to get that information direct from the source instead of going through filtering of 15 people and what they think it means. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can understand that could be your launch pad. Like, okay, you saw a TikTok. For example, someone has a TikTok about they saw someone who read Dolores Cannon's book. Okay, that's now filtered by 4 different people. Mm-hmm. But if that's what gets you to go out and get Dolores's book, great. Then do that. Spirit lovingly always gives us these little gifts in the most randomest of ways, trust me. But I know, like for you, music sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I've been having a lot of weird experiences with music. My Alexa keeps playing these very, very random songs at times. And I will actually write down the songs and we'll look up the lyrics. There's some that have been bone chilling. There's some that absolutely make sense and just it made sense. But for you, what are some little signs that you get that make you wake up and pay attention?
Oh, definitely. And when the teammate on the team, Alex, she actually has seen this a couple times. I get a set of numbers that always show up for me. And I can usually, it always just comes in like, I'm not looking for it. It like puts itself, right? And it's always usually, especially if I'm going somewhere, it's the last 2 numbers on a license plate, and the car is the one jumping in front of my car, like swerving in front of me, and I'm like worried I was gonna get in a car accident or something, but it's right there, it's right in my face, and it makes it really hard to ignore. And it's stuff like that.
Or it's the cost of whatever it is that you want.
Exactly. And
eat.
We even did that, we went somewhere and I got a card, and one of the numbers
That's
again, it was 2 sets of the same number alternating, and it's just stuff like that. And for me, numbers are really big. I also really listen to what foods I'm craving, because that also is how like I'm also getting downloads in a sense of like, if I'm craving these foods, I look up
spiritual significance of.
Yeah, and I investigate it, and it's weird how it comes together. But the more you just pay attention to that stuff, and also just I like to think of the universe likes to speak to us, since it doesn't have a mouth, obviously, through
Like
symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be wise enough to look and understand that we're not going to have a full-on conversation mouth to mouth like we are now. But if you just pay attention to what's going on around you, the feelings, and give yourself space for it, it does wonders. It really does.
Well, and I think that's part of the process of learning to trust yourself too, is when you're getting those hits and you look it up and it's hitting and you're validating it over and over and over, then you learn, okay, when it comes through that way and I get that feeling, that's how I can trust that.
Yeah.
When you're, with the case with your numbers, you're not paying attention or whatever, and that number literally almost, cuts you off in traffic and is right there glaring you in the face. It's almost like your reminder from spirit, realign, or bubble, or whatever it is that you need. And I think things like that are important because, again, coming from someone like me, these things are just rudimentary. Like, I know them, they're instinctual. But to have someone like you who's going freshly through the process pretty recently, I mean, in the past 4 or 5 years, it's great for me to be able to help share that. So I know that somewhere along the line, this is going to help some people.
Yay.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
And if people want to find you on TikTok?
Yes. It's I am Saige. You spell Saige with Saige. So you can find my TikTok there, and then I also have an Instagram that you can also link back to TikTok, and that one is Saige Auburn.
And I will link all of that not only in the description but also on my socials, which is probably where most of you will end up finding this.
Yes.
That seems to be how life works now.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my God.
I always love being with you.
Same. I couldn't imagine not doing this. This is awesome. Next time, we'll take more time.
Yes, that sounds amazing.
All right. Love you, honey.
I love you.
See you all soon.